Hi, everyone. Welcome. So excited to be here. So this is the first artists conversation with artists for Home, the online exhibition at Acogedor. So it's at acogedor.space/gallery. So my name is Nicole Rademacher, and I founded Acogedor in 2017 as an intimate alternative project space, basically right outside of my house in my front area. And given the pandemic and where we're at, I was inspired by other people creating new projects and doing new exhibitions and things online. So I thought I would do an exhibition, which is the first for Acogedor, and do it online. So it opened yesterday, it launched yesterday, and we're all super excited. So thank you everyone for being here on Facebook Live, and thank you to each one of the artists for participating in this conversation today. This is a series of 5 panels, so it'll be weekly, and it'll be with the artists as they're grouped in the different kind of thought areas in the show. And then the last panel will be on the 3rd of October, which is the last day of the exhibition, and that will be a closing panel. Just to let you know, this is recorded, and so we'll archive it. It's supposed to be broadcast on the exhibition page, but I'm having a little technical difficulty, so maybe I can figure that out a little bit later. My test didn't seem to come straight through. So I also want to let you know that I do have a young son that he may Zoom through once in a while. He's supposed to be over there eating dinner, but we'll see what happens. So we have 4 wonderful artists with us today. We have Teresa Flores, who is in East LA. We have Renée Fox, who is joining us from Inglewood in California near Los Angeles. Georgina Lewis, who is joining us from Boston, correct? And Dena Novak, who is also joining us from Los Angeles. I'm going to give a quick intro to each one of the artists. Let me pull up their work. So we have, let's see, make sure this, share my screen. Can everybody see that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is cool. So this is Teresa's work that's in the show. It's called I Got It From My Mama. It's a video that's 30 minutes and 54 seconds. Teresa, do you want to unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and a quick little blurb about the work?
Yeah. So I'm quarantined here. This is my living room, and this living room has become this kind of multi-space for me where I work out, I dance, I stretch, I make art, I make videos, anything that's commissioned. And so it's a studio space and it's a workspace, but it's also a learning space for me. And so part of that involves me learning Zumba and just dancing. I'm not the greatest dancer. and so I kind of started taking the time to like work on my dance skills while I'm here alone with nobody looking. But in addition to that, they're Latin dances. And so the title Got It From My Mama comes kind of just playing on this idea that a lot of people's moms like teach them how to dance and teach them these Latin dance moves. And I don't think my mom really knows these dance moves because she never taught them to me. So I'm learning them as I go. But I do dance like my mom.
Great, thank you, Teresa. I'm going to stop the share. If you want to just wave to make sure everybody sees you. Yeah. And next we have, I'm going to show Renee's work. Do you want to just do a quick wave? And I'm going to, and I'll do a screen share. Great, can everyone see that? All right, tell us a little bit about yourself and about the work, Renée.
Hi, thank you, Nicole. So I am an artist in Los Angeles. I live work studios here in Inglewood. And so a lot of that use of space didn't change during the pandemic. However, during the lockdown, I definitely, experienced some of the anxiety from this kind of not knowing what was going on, and in a very bizarre situation that I think no one expected. So I didn't leave my space for a really long time, and I had just finished a series of work. My work tends to have be interested in storytelling. I like to reference myth and popular children's stories. With a layer of sweetness, but also a dark kind of underlying, sometimes mystery or reality that it can touch while still being approachable. So this piece is called Ophelia, Falling is Frightening. And I got the idea to do a series on Ophelia during this time because I've been reading and rereading and watching film, and I saw a short on Ophelia. And so I ordered the play and reread the play, and I realized after reading the play, this character is super flat, and she's basically a scapegoat for Hamlet's disapproval of his mother. And so I thought, well, it could be interesting to empower this character, to give her some real experience and some choices in her role. So this is the first in a series of paintings in that vein.
Great, thank you, Renée. Next is Georgina. Say hi, Georgina. Okay, I'm going to show you her work.
Hey there.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I just said hey there.
Yeah, we're good. There we go. The screen share. All right.
So in describing myself, I usually give sort of how I started and what I've traditionally been doing. And then I think there's what I'm doing during the pandemic. So my background is in sound. I have a MFA in sound art from Bard College. After graduating, I kind of moved away from sound, but have been doing a sort of cross-disciplinary practice that's kind of conceptual in nature with a lot of different media like text, photography, sculpture, drawing, and installation. I think that kind of covers it. And so what you're looking at now is extremely different from what I normally do. When the lockdown started, and in Massachusetts, it started in mid-May, we had COVID quite early. When the lockdown started, I began making these, what I call drawings, even though there's paint in them, with materials that I had on hand at the time, which were red paint, paper, and graphite pencils and graphite sticks. And I did a couple of them just, I don't know, to do something, because everything was so weird. But then I kept doing them. And the first ones were abstract, but then they became more sort of figurative. And here we have the very obvious bed. So I'm talking now from what is also my kitchen, studio, and office. So the notion of what constitutes home at this point is so very different as both a place of domesticity, but also I think for many of us, a place of anxiety, and also where we live our lives in sort of totality, except for our little trips to the grocery store. So the title of this piece is How Do You Sleep at Night, Part 1, and it has kind of a double meaning, or a double entendre, of both addressing the sort of prevalent anxiety of, oh my gosh, how are you sleeping at night? but also in terms of the greater context of things, of just all the sort of multiple horrors going on. A question to those in charge of how do you sleep at night, you know, given all the horrors that are going on. So there's that kind of set of multiple questions. And I think in terms of gestures, I found drawing to be very comforting and also very challenging. I like the fact that the only way to recover from a mistake in drawing is to keep going further and to keep pushing. And during this time of anxiety, I found that a really good challenge. A term that I came up with thinking of this, but also thinking of some of the other pieces I've seen in this grouping, was small but mighty.
Thank you, Georgina. All right, now we have Dena. She's gonna talk a bit about her work. I'm gonna show it to you, and then we'll get to the conversation. I do want to point out in the comments that I said I'm monitoring them, so all of you that are watching, it's so great to see you guys watching. If you have a question or anything, feel free to post it there. So say hi, Dena. And I'm gonna show Dena's work. All right, Dena, take it away. You're muted, Dena. There.
Okay, hi. So this piece is actually a really large size painting for me. It's like 4 feet by 3 feet. And that's actually, most of my work is 8 by 10 inches. And I think that for me, the idea of staying home increased my space. I know for many people, they talked about the pandemic really like being like their world became smaller, more confined, and they had to kind of learn to live in these new parameters. So I actually have a chronic illness, and I feel like the pandemic for me opened up my world to a kind of bigger space in a way, because me painting at home, I was able to like use all the space. I was able to do bigger gestures, and it's freed me up in a way that was surprising, because for me, home is my body, and because my body is limited from a genetic condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which basically the cartilage, the connective tissue in my body is made faulty on the genetic level. And so for me, my body's limited. My body is my kind of spiritual home. And when I paint, to paint with such large gestures, it took a lot out of my body to make such a large painting. So I kind of think of myself as like a Jack Russell Terrier. I pack a lot of like energy in these very small 8 by 10 inch paintings. But again, for me, this whole virtual online world was the world I was kind of living in with chronic illness, and my daughter has the same actual illness. So it's actually been a form of empowerment for me. I think that's
great.
yeah.
Thank you, Dena. So at this point, everyone's got a little intro about themselves, their work, and the work in the show. We had talked last week to just, kind of familiarize ourselves with one another's work and our processes. And one thing that came up that I would really like you guys to start with is to talk about the use of empowerment, how either that's part of your process, or you show that in the work, or you get that from the work. If you guys want to just jump in and unmute yourself.
I can go. So with my work, it's this, the privacy that I have in my home and the solitude there. that's empowering, because I have shared through a video some of what I'm doing, but that's not anything that I'm like obliged to share with anybody or to put on social media or even tell anybody that I'm doing. To share that, to me, it's kind of a way of just bonding with other people who are going through the same thing, like other Latinas who also don't have the best rhythm or also didn't learn these dances, because there's a lot of shame that comes with that when you don't meet these cultural expectations that people think that you should have or should just like be automatically like downloaded and built in within you. So to share that, it's kind of an act for me to like try to bring that out into the light, but also the act of me just doing it is an act of empowerment in my living room. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that the act of doing this in my kitchen has been tremendously empowering. I mean, this is the place where, you know, it kind of like smells of onions usually or something like that, but instead I'm leaning over a table with these like goofy little foam brushes that I had using this red paint and making these drawings. And one of the things that's really important to me about drawings, and I think it's because of my sound background, is the actual sound that the graphite makes on the paper, particularly paper that has paint on it. So it's got a bit of tooth, a bit of surface to it. So there's something sort of lulling and mesmerizing for me about that, and also about the gesture, the motion of it. Some of the things that I've done have been quite frantic, I think, but a lot of them are more sort of slow, not necessarily a cautious slowness, but just sort of what feels right. And I think that being in my space gives me like, well, if that's what feels right to me, hey, that's it. So these are maybe a bit more personal, but yet they seem to apply to others also.
Yes, I can talk. My piece, I feel in the content of the work, by empowering a character, it's almost like using the work therapeutically. Like there's this stand-in, and I can put this energy toward making sure this other character has choices, isn't trapped, has experiences, is not subjectified. You know, and it, I think that all helps to feed into to better feelings, more empowerment for myself. And, you know, simply making work at this time, I think almost every artist I've spoken to, you know, right now feels definitely more alive, more normal when we're, you know, in our studios and doing what we're supposed to do. And I've seen like some of the best work come out of this time. People are really affected, and so there are emotions going into the work that are also really intense. And so I think you feel that when you see it, and to me that's also empowering, seeing that in other artists' work.
I'd like to say something on that, which is talking about how a lot of people are making some of their best work. I think for me, I want to talk about the idea of like intentionality for my work, which for me is, I kind of have to backtrack a little. So about 3 years ago, that's when the manifestation of Ehlers-Danlos kind of happened for me. And it happened on my right side. And of course, as an artist and teacher, like I had very strong fine motor skills. And so it changed. And I decided kind of like before the pandemic, in a way, 6 months, that I was going to paint with a palette knife, not with a brush, not with, you know, in a way like Renee's work is so delicate. I kind of said, okay, I can't do that right now. That's not going to happen, the delicateness to my work. And there was part of it. So I decided to intentionally embrace the physicality of my work, which was this incredible visceral intensity for paint, like material overload times hallucinations times. I mean, you just go for it. I don't know what, but it was just like I wanted to intentionally embrace that. And so I paint just with a palette knife, and I really intentionally pack these little 8x10s with this life force. And what was nice about, for me, again, I was doing that before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit, my space increased in my head, because now I always used to stress like, oh, everybody wants to go to the galleries. It's, you know, Friday night, Saturday night. I know that if I go out till 10 o'clock or 10:30 or 11, the next 2 days I'll be sleeping, and then I've got 2 teens. And it's like the trade-off to actually go to an art opening was so intense for me. It would, like, I would have to sleep the day of. And so to be able to go online and to engage constantly now with the art world has been opening. And I think that's kind of illustrated that the work got bigger, and there's a lot more gestures in the work, and I'm using my body more and able to take breaks. So that for me is a little kind of piece I wanted to piggyback on Renee's, like talking about artists becoming more intentional.
Also, there's a catharsis in it. Just that, like, people are making, maybe some people are making their best work, but maybe there's other people just compelled to make work. Like, it doesn't matter if it's like good or if it's ever even going to see the light of day, but just that people are going through this incredibly stressful time of transition and like just compelled to create or put their creative energy into something. And I think that's very empowering in some ways. Like, that's probably one of the best things that we can pull out of this situation right now, because it's so stressful in so many ways.
I think also with what you were saying, you know, here in LA, I mean, different parts of America keep being hit different times. It seems like it's just this crazy wave that keeps hitting us. And I think another thing that's kind of come from this is like what I like to think of as in like intentional life buoys. Like, we've placed people around us in bubbles, you know, like I have my friends at their art studio that I kind of go to this group of amazing artists and creatives, and I spend my time there, and we're kind of like all, I feel, at least in my bubbles, very nurturing and trying to help each other, and like, oh, well, like if this school closed, let's have outdoor art classes, and this is that. It's kind of a lot of brainstorming, you know, which again is, I think, the land of the artist, you know, that constant like reframing and the intensity of the world and expressing it, and kind of like I always felt almost too sensitive to the world, and now the whole world's also kind of there with me, so sensitive, you know, and it's just, it's kind of bringing it along.
I wanted to add to that. I think that kind of that nurturing feeling. I have other artists in a studio that I spend a lot of time at around me, and it's my boyfriend's studio, so I'm there a lot, and they've become part of our bubble. We've been very careful, so this group is incredibly caretaking as well, and sometimes you'll show up and we'll have critiques on work, we'll kind of talk about what we're doing, but other times it's just like cooking with each other. And you know, I think just tying that into this idea of using a surrogate in my work, like just as empowering that, I feel empowering other people at this time as well in these communities. Well, it's really the only way forward to strengthen our own communities. It's made all of that, I think, really, it's made that idea of this pandemic very clear that, you know, we've got to have strength with each other. And I think local sorts of gatherings and support in that way, especially between artists, since we're such a small group, is really important.
I agree with that. And I feel like also that because most of my, most of my discussions in general are remote or sort of virtual. But I feel like there's also amongst communities a greater willingness to share vulnerabilities, which I think for artists is also, I don't know if it's nurturing or rather that it allows us to nurture those around us. But it just feels different. And in the midst of, I think, layers and layers of shock and anxiety that somehow, I hate to say that it seems good, but it does seem good.
I think it's great that everybody can come together, or that a lot of people are coming together and organizing to support each other. But I mean, we're doing this because we have to. It's essential. The government is not coming to save us. There's no corporation stepping up to help the people. We have to save ourselves. We have to take care of each other. And we're doing the best that we can considering the circumstances. Like, we're fighting a pandemic and white supremacy and a horrible depression and unemployment. So what we're pulling out from this is really just digging into whatever resiliency that humanity has right now. And that includes making art.
Yeah. Oh, is that working? Yeah, I also wanted to piggyback on that too, which is that, in LA, in California, the artist community is being hit tremendously, hard. And I do agree that it's interesting, I often feel during this time compelled to make political art. It's like, here we are, and I think, like, I have a 15-year-old daughter who's about to turn 16, and when you hear how they see the world from their view, it's like, I completely agree that we're like at this pivotal position. And at the same time, I think there's a place for like all the arts. Some people I know are making really political art and addressing like Black Lives Matter and like racism and anti-Semitism and all of that. And I oftentimes feel like, oh, am I like not quite in the like, should I like do that? But then there's also kind of like saying, hey, wait a sec, like me doing the art that I'm supposed to be doing right now is my purpose. And like, in a way, my protest, I'm just like piggybacking. I feel like every time I like make these huge, thick 8x10-inch paintings or incredible, like embrace the intensity of my own work, I'm also, it's a tiny protest. And I feel like we're all looking at our art as how are we relating. It's even for me, which is purely the most visceral art, like it's all material. Intentionality again is like, sometimes I do think to myself, this piece of paint is a protest piece of paint.
I just want to add a small thing, as well, which is actually a big thing. We have an environmental disaster kind of looming. Our Earth is actually in trouble, and so there's also I think being here in California and like seeing the fires and this, the fact that there's global warming happening also has had me making work about the environment. But like Dena says, we're all using our voices to kind of observe and to work with what's happening and speak about things to each other, work through it. I mean, as artists, our voices are I feel we have a responsibility to speak with whatever we have to say. And shows like this, like what Nicole's putting up, I feel like on that context of empowerment are pretty wonderful to get us all together. I was feeling pretty trapped at first and not knowing how to connect with other artists. I couldn't go to exhibitions or openings the way I did, and I still don't feel quite safe to do that. But it's it's great to have these online connections with whatever we have to say.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think also that, not that there's a unity of voices, because unfortunately in our country there's tremendous disunity right now, but I think also that I think that a lot of the work that I'm seeing people make, it may be an incredibly sort of internal gesture, but it also seems to be relevant to a large group of people at the same time. I certainly feel that about the stuff that I'm making, whereas previously it's been kind of cerebral, and like if you've read the right criticism or something like that, maybe you'll get it. Whereas this, I think that there's so much stuff that it's just like, there it is, right in your face.
I just kind of want to, the sustaining is important, you know, and creating like places where we can share each other's voices. And because I feel like my art has a lot to do perhaps with disability, in that creating a smaller space though that seems larger, I think is also what's happening, is also an opening for like artists with disabilities. I think is and I want to like say that again, I always want to like, there is something very rococo about me that just wants to keep putting more and more things on the same thing until it like explodes into color and things. And there's a kind of a show recently that I thought was really interesting that made me kind of say, wow, something about like showing yourself for who you are. It's called Opulent Mobility. And my daughter has, like when she walks from this disease, her hip will disconnect or her knee will after a block or two. For me, it's more in my hands and my shoulders. But the idea of like taking a mobility aid and like making it opulent, again, that's another form to me of a protest. You know, you're not saying I'm going to have a wheelchair and it's going to be like the nice neutral wheelchair. No, this is like, how do you change it into this like visceral thing of opulence, you know? And again, somehow that ties into my work, and my protest in this time is to continue to search for that opulence and things.
I just want to say I really like that idea of making a wheelchair opulent. That's just such a gorgeous idea, because, you know, people sort of feel sorry for someone in a wheelchair, but it's like, just be glamorous. And that's, you know, I'm a cyclist. And so I'm always really fascinated watching the Paralympics, where you see, and I was at the track last spring, and there was a cyclist who had, I think he had one leg, and the way he was riding, it was just, it was impressive and incredibly empowering and humbling also, just to see this man so strong doing things I couldn't think of doing.
And I think it ties into the idea of what you were saying, Renee, and especially Teresa. You were saying, you know, we're in a situation, like you were talking the politics, but there's something really empowering. It's almost like we have to tell the truth, because like you said, we have a society that's not, you know, and something is like, kind of, there's this idea, like you think, oh, if I get like a wheelchair, like my daughter, we're looking for one for her. And there's an idea, well, we'll blend in. No, you're not blending in. You know, you clearly are in a wheelchair, you're using a mobility aid. So at least be honest with you, like honest to they're noticing it anyway. So just be authentic with it and embrace it. It's like a truth, you know, and it seems like what we're all talking about is a lacking of truth in the world and in our society. So by us embracing our art in any which way or form, it's bringing more truth into the world. Just protest a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of politics going on with our bodies right now, with all of the different variations of our bodies. You know, you have a chronic illness, I have a chronic illness, mine is invisible. Yours is a little bit more visible when you have those aids with you. But I mean, just what we're struggling with in general is just this empowerment with our bodies, just this right for every single body, no matter what color it is, no matter what it's going through in its health system, is just to have this ability to be free and healthy, just to live a free, healthy, happy life on this planet. You know, and it's like, how is that so much to ask for? But this is what we're struggling over so deeply this year.
Yeah, thinking, because I think we all really like this idea of the opulent mobility, and to me, there's something also about not just making a mobility device opulent, but really shaking up perceptions. And I think that a lot needs to be shaken up right now, and people are really starting to address that, or continuing to address.
Yeah, I mean, that it's been being addressed for a long time, but it's people have just, I don't know, not been listening or something, or you know, there's all of these systems built in to dismantle it, and you know, to block our efforts to dismantle it. And so that's where things have just come to this boiling point now.
The word disempowerment comes to mind. That's, you know, we're talking about a series on empowerment, and I mean, look, I'm looking at all of us, we're female. When, you know, I have to say there's an element of disempowerment, you know, and but, and you're right, but I still see a lot of, maybe it's because I have a 15 and an 18-year-old. They're so right on, you know, they don't like, they really get, they're really suffering, and they're also really positive, and they want to just go out there and protest. They can't understand why everybody's not, you know, there aren't millions in the street. That is, you know, I think that is, for me, having to look at them, I see how they're not deluding themselves. They know we're on fire in every way.
But part of like the work that you and I have been doing, Dena, is sometimes we can't go out into the street, and we can't be in the street to protest, you know, and our protest has to come in different ways and different forms. So like me dancing in my living room after spending 2 years debilitated from endometriosis is a victory for me. Like, that's super empowering for me to do. You just piling on paint in all of these layers and opulence, like that's an empowering thing. And I think that those forms of protest need to kind of be recognized more, because yes, we do need to have people in the streets protesting, but we also need to look at other ways that we can protest and demonstrate, because those are also very powerful, very important and significant too.
So I saw your video, Teresa, and one thing that really affected me is this vulnerability of it. It, you know, I felt like, oh, like she could be, you know, she's taking these classes, and typically you're the one doing it, and you're watching the one who knows what they're doing. And I'm seeing someone who's like learning and kind of, and I always feel, and this leads into the context of the exhibition, you know, that little gestures, that things that say I'm vulnerable or I'm human, like evidence of the hand or something delicate, can hopefully bring forth an experience of compassion, or for someone to realize, oh, a human being did this, and connect on that level. And like Dena, I have I don't have a teenager. I have a stepdaughter who's 23 years old, and she's also, you know, just angry and wants to be out there, and also can't. She's like, everyone should be out there and doing something about this. And you know, thank God for the youth. I think when you're young and you know, that's their job, is to get out there and really, you know, be physical and scream about it. And then, you know, either through disability or age or you know, not being as privileged or different reasons, all of us have voices of different capacities. It could be more physical or more gentle, but I think about that a lot, just with the way that I work and how that connects with other people.
Your work is so gentle, your lines. It's incredible. Like you can almost, it's really quite beautiful. It's so gentle. There's a lot of power in gentleness. You know, it's not just powerful to like big and visceral and heavy, you know, there's so much gentleness in like the tiniest stroke.
I want to share, I was reading A.A. Milne today, and like those little illustrations of Winnie the Pooh and Piglet, like talk about power in gentleness and in sensitivity. It just, I was like, oh God, everything's right with the world, Pooh and Piglet.
I think also with those Pooh and Piglet images, which I also adore, there's something about those really are very sparse, and yet they convey so much. And I think that a lot of what we're talking about or showing, you know, somebody dancing in their kitchen, I mean, that shows so much. There's ways in which working with a little bit or a limited color palette or a muted color palette, whatever it is, it's so much.
Yeah, the gracefulness of Renee's paintings with like the awkward clumsiness of my dancing, you know, there are these very like small movements, but they do pile up, you know, like the dancing comes into like, it's like a 30-minute choreography session, you know, it's not the most graceful thing that I've ever done, but it's still like that I'm taking this space, my very small living room. If you look at the video, like I can only move maybe like 3 steps that way, 2 or 3 steps that way, and then 2 or 3 steps that way before I like run out of room. Whereas like Renee's got like these very graceful brush strokes that she's taking up on this canvas, and they just kind of like, it feels like they fill the whole thing, but you know that she's got like these little gestures that took up that space.
Teresa, I do have to say though, it was cool though, like even though you were learning, and it was, you know, the like maybe a little awkward, but like I mean, like I would want to dance with girlfriends in my house like that, and you definitely were like, you know, putting your own style into it, so that was obvious. I just had to mention.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
There was, I'm sorry, I wanted to touch on one thing is, as we're talking about like different physicalities and vulnerabilities, one thing that also came up when we did our prep meeting was this idea of the art and what we're doing as a life source. And I think as we're talking about how we are making it through and how we're protesting in different ways, I was wondering if you guys could kind of touch on that as well.
Yeah, for me, again, I think I've probably touched on this maybe the most, which is that like each act of like painting feels to me, well, it feels to me like the life source it's not just the act of painting, but it's getting to a place in my life where when I'm painting, I really kind of have a sense of what I'm trying to say. You know, I'm like 52 now or something. And it's like, again, having to get rid of the brush for me and having to embrace the palette knife, it's a life source, because if I didn't do this, it's like I keep thinking of Teresa dancing in her living room. You know, it's like, so it's so easy to dance when you have another person and you think it's the eye of the other dictating who you are on the dance floor. But to dance in your house or dance with your girlfriends, it's a whole different dynamic, and it's so powerful because you're embracing your life source, which is you. For me, moving my arm, my right side, I'm right-sided, and that's where it's all happening. So the act of like, I also think to myself, like, what's going to happen in 10 years to this arm? So it's like when I'm painting now, it is an act of protest. It's a life source, but it's also getting to a certain place where I actually a little bit know what I want to say to the world. And it's almost like I was listening. Okay. I was actually listening online on icons on Facebook, and they were talking about the actor who just passed, who was in Black Panther, and he says, and he's amazing. He says, like, you have a purpose and you do your purpose, and it's like he said, and your purpose is who you are. It's from God, whatever, he used that word, but I can say whatever the whole universe is. And it's like, you have a purpose. And I know, like, my art is making sense to me at this point in my life. And that is kind of a double life source for me, because it's what you want to say and having the ability to say it.
Yeah, that actor was Chadwick Boseworth. But yeah, the life source of like coming from this work. I mean, we breathe, right? In, out every day, inhale, exhale. And the same thing is just that our energies manifest in these ways where we have to like exert them, either like you're putting them on canvas, Dena, you know, but like there's just moments where I'm home here, I'm like sitting still, I'm working, or I'm standing at the stove, I'm cooking, you know, but I want to move, I want to dance. The clubs are closed, I can't dance with my friends. Like I have to dance at home, I have to dance alone, I have to dance with whatever is on the TV, you know. And it's just it's a need for my body. Like I have to like bring that energy out. Nothing else is gonna like do it for me, you know. I can go ahead and draw and stuff, but that's a different energy, that's a different exhale. So yeah, it's I think that a lot of this this quarantine that we have been in is where people have had to kind of turn inside and been like, what does my body need today? How can I honor this energy? Where is my energy right now?
Yeah, I think for me, breathing, speaking of breathing, drawing has been a sort of way for me to focus my breath, but also I realized that a lot of the drawings that I have made not when I'm feeling happy. I make them when actually if I'm feeling anxious or depressed even, because it's a way to force myself to push past those feelings. And also because one of the things that I like, one of the challenges of drawing is for me getting to a place where it's really broken and then fixing it. And there's something when the world feels so broken to have that slight bit of agency, at least with what I'm working on. And also I'm doing it again in the privacy of this tiny little kitchen, as opposed to at my studio or when there are people around. I mean, there is somebody who, my partner, might take a peek, but there is something hugely, there's some sort of psychological benefit to doing it, which I don't normally think about with my work.
Georgina, can you talk a little bit? I keep thinking about when we met earlier this week, and you talked, and then I think I even told I told a friend about your drawing and how it was meditative and the sound of the charcoal, and it's soothing to hear you actually like talk about it and the sound, because you're a sound artist, and how It's not just drawing, but there's a sound to it that you're relating to.
Yeah, so there's a definite sound, I guess I would say, and this is maybe my nerdy sound artist part, but it's a sort of limited frequency spectrum. So it's not exactly like white noise, but there's it's also a focusing mechanism, I think. There are people who like, and I'm one of them, who like, for instance, to listen to drone music, just these like extended tones. And there's something about, and especially when I was doing these circle drawings, and I actually was making recordings of that. I haven't really done anything with them yet, but I will at some point. But yeah, the sound, it sounds weird, but I could escape myself and be the sound or live in the sound. And I think that's one of the things that I really like about sound and by extension music. But there's just something to me so comforting from the regularity of it, but also these sort of punctuations of, you know, if you put the pencil down sharply, then you get this sort of tap or something. But it's to me, it's just, because it's a limited palette, you can really, really focus and concentrate on it, as opposed to like if you walk out into the street and there's like people talking or cars or birds or just this sort of like chaos of sound, which can be quite compelling, but it's the reverse. It's this very limited.
Yeah, I'm not, it doesn't relate to sound, but the life force of the work, it's almost the comforting part for me. I mean, it feels, gosh, it's all kind of in my own head when I work, but I do listen to music. I listen to classical, I listen to whatever I feel like that day. Sometimes it's reggae or whatever I need. But the work itself kind of like speaks back to me, and I guess at those moments it feels, like I said before, very kind of therapeutic, and cathartic, just in, you know, the feeling that I got something out or got it the way I wanted it to be, even though it's, you know, painstaking in my case.
I have to say, I see a comment on Facebook about the fan blades in my video, and that those are keeping like a momentum. And I've got sirens here. The sounds of Estelle. Okay. Anyway, but yeah, the fan blades, like sometimes that's the only other thing moving in my home is like me and the fan. And so yeah, I'm really glad that somebody noticed it and pointed it out. So thank you.
Thanks for monitoring Facebook, Teresa. That's great.
took
Helps
a
me with
peek.
my job here. Yeah, kind of in this pause, I want to say that most people are, they are really feeling together with everything that you guys are saying as far as disabilities, as far as protests and being able to protest in different ways that we can protest. There are some, like, people have shared this with other friends that they know that have Ehlers-Danlos. Is that how you pronounce it? I'm sorry. But you know what, the condition that Dena has, that is, you know, very debilitating. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of people who are really feeling validated themselves with hearing you guys talk about what you've been going through and your experiences through the pandemic, and I think just in life and as an artist. I think one thing that we talked about that I'm not sure we've really touched on is this idea of accountability. Accountability in making the work, lack of accountability here, being in our houses all the time, but then there's like this other type of accountability that we had.
I see an accountability in Georgina's piece I mean, just alone in the title, how do you sleep at night? But my question about that piece is like, did you make that before or after George Floyd was murdered? Because
I made it after, shortly thereafter.
do you, like, you made the piece, and I would see that it opens up a conversation. But what kind of conversations, or do you use your art to open the conversations, or do you bring the conversations also just like person to person to address accountability?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think previously I have had a very separate life in terms of me, myself, and how I talk to people versus the work that I make. I think it's, and I think, to put it politely, I guess right now I'm just too mad to have that separation. And also because I get to have fewer actual interactions with people. So my work has become more of a way with creating dialogues. Does that sort of
Georgina,
get to the
what do you mean by like, wait, okay, so I just want to make sure I'm clear because I turned on the light. So you're too mad to have the conversation still? Because I kind of feel that way. So you're using the art to have the conversation right now?
or not that I'm too mad to have the conversation, although I guess it depends who the other person is. But rather I'm too mad to have what has previously been a separation between how I talk to people in the world and how I approach the world versus the kind of art that I make. So I think that traditionally I have not made work that is necessarily political, although I've made work that addresses environmental issues. But I think right now I just don't want to have that separation. I want to be expressing a lot more of my feelings and sentiments and ideas about the world.
It's a really powerful piece, your piece.
I think I'm really lucky that the paint that I had was red paint. And I think that, and I mean, since starting those, I've gotten more red paint and intentionally continued with that. But
I feel lucky to also say that I'm working on a public art project at the moment. Public art is a part of my practice, and the accountability there, as far as what I do with my work, I feel is to provide what a certain space needs, in a sense. I've done work at LAX Airport that was, for kind of busy travelers going down a hall, and the next one is at the Restorative Care Village in Sylmar in California near the UCLA Medical Center. And so it kind of, it seeks to connect the patients who would be there and the people who would be working with the surrounding environment, hopefully kind of inspiring that healing and reflection that comes with being able to actually see and be in your environment. I just wanted to share that I think that's where I'm dealing with that concept of accountability in my work these days.
I don't think my work deals with accountability in a public sense, to be honest.
I feel like you're holding your body accountable in some ways with your work, and that's with yourself. Yeah.
I guess in that way, and especially with my daughter, she's also she's an artist, and I'm a pretty amazing artist. So, but that's a space, I guess, in a way I do really, I think is incredibly important.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the conversation that we had through accountability was kind of, it wove between not only our work but also our lives, and how being in your house all the time and supposedly being, you can just connect all the time, um, and being accountable to everybody all the time, how that kind of changes, and then also figuring out how to find the space and find the time to make work, like we had talked about with this life source. And I remember in Georgina, in your artist statement, it talked about this need, this and I think somebody in one of the comments talked about like this impulse to create, and how it was like a driving force in you.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, in trying to get ready for this, I counted out how many of these drawings I have now, and I have 68 of them, which kind of, I was kind of taken aback by that. I didn't realize that because I've just been doing them. Like, it's just this thing I do now.
I see just there's just this kind of struggle that we all usually have. We have like an internal resistance to some things or some ideas or some kind of actions just as we go about our lives. But it's come to this point now where there is this accountability for how white people have been privileged in society, and people of color have been marginalized, and then there's the making of the art, and then there's the action that comes from it, which is where I feel like accountability is really important, because we can make the art and we can put it out there for people to talk about it, but ourselves as artists, I feel like we have to have that accountability to the work, that we are going to have these discussions and address things within ourselves and look at privilege and look at marginalizations, and see, how can we work against them? Who can we talk to about them to, be on our side or get them to be more open to it, something. But I know that that's a lot of the discussion that like white people have been having to do with each other and with their families too.
Yeah, I think as a pretty white looking person, I can say that, yes, that conversation has definitely happened with my daughters, and to the point that, um, they were actually like, they really, yes, I mean, we've talked a lot about that. And what does that mean? I just almost knocked off my thing, but that they have to be accountable to others, and them being aware of like their privilege and then again their trauma. It goes both ways. But I think that my accountability might be right now that I kind of like, it really hit me the last couple days. Like, it was one thing last year with the homeschooling and everything, but this year was like, okay, they're like full-time, like on their computer, 2 teens, one who struggles more than the other. And it's like, wow, I have to be accountable to them. And it's some of the ways I kind of need my own space is sometimes I'll paint late at night, like from 10 o'clock to 3. And I'll just like play really loud music, and I will just like, I have to be accountable to let my inner muse out, to allow my like artistic voice to not be overtaken by the world, the situation, the way we're all on top of each other. And I've been married a whole of 2 years, so my husband's also home, so it's kind of like a full-fledged, like, sometimes you can hear teens screaming and yelling and slamming, but I am happy. I do think it's important. We need to teach everybody that there is privilege, and then they have to start questioning, what does that mean? And it was really, one of my daughters was with a grandparent, and the grandparent was giving their very not politically correct opinion on Black Lives Matters and the protests, and gender pronouns and gay rights. And so she came back and she goes, so my grandma, who's this 80-year-old white privileged woman who's never worked, told me this. And I was like, it was like she could think that far out. You know what I'm saying? Like, she's like, so she goes, you'd rather be naive than know the truth. And the grandmother said, yeah. It's like, but at least they're not taking that on. They're able to, so that's my accountability. I think for me is to teach my daughters to be more accountable. And I don't think that it's never done. It's not an over thing just because we had, a few months of this. It doesn't mean it's done.
Well, it's 20 to 8. I kind of want to wrap up a little bit. We've gone through a lot of them was like really encouraging comments and people, like I mentioned, who felt validated. If there is anybody that has a question that wants to put it in the comment section now, and I'll just keep refreshing. But I'll take this moment to just kind of summarize what we went much deeper than we did when we met last week, and I think this is really beautiful. And I really want to thank you guys for opening yourselves up and doing that, for being so vulnerable, not only in your work but also in the conversation we had last week, and then even deeper in this conversation. Talking about privilege, talking about the state of the world right now and where we're at and how does that feel, and the discomfort that you're sitting with, and the things that make you happy, because this wasn't a whole depressing conversation. In fact, it was uplifting in a lot of ways. For me, as kind of I didn't want to talk, and you guys did an amazing job of really having a conversation. Sorry, there's a chat that came through, and so I got distracted. But yeah, you guys were really just so genuine, and so I feel humbled that I was able to be a part of this, and you carried on the conversations yourselves and went where you needed to go. It was quite beautiful to watch. Yeah, we have a comment that they were Justin, I'm going to pronounce his last name wrong, Ares, said that it was good to address the issue of privilege, and I think it is, especially in not only in the climate that we have, but in this platform, because of who we are, because that we're women and we all identify as she, her, and what does that mean? We're oppressed in certain ways, but we're not. And I know that Teresa identifies as Latina, and I have my own riddled past with how I can identify or not identify with Latina, but let's not get into adoption politics. And I don't know, I haven't talked with Renee or Georgina or Dena about, your racial identity, but it's not always about what you can see. It's also about your lived experiences. And lastly, I want to thank you for talking about disability and bringing that to the forefront, because I think that's something that doesn't often get talked about. And yeah, you guys are renegades with that.
I wanted to say, I was really hesitant. I've really struggled with the disability part, because I don't want my art to be about disability. And so I've been kind of debating with the few people I'm close with who are artists, and they were kind of saying to me, but Dena, you're not, you don't realize that it's part of why you're painting this way. It's part of this. It's why you paint in bursts of paint. It's probably why, and I'm like, yeah, but I feel like, oh, that's just it's playing a victim. And they're like, no, it's really not. It's taken me a lot of work and time, and again, I'm 52, and my mobility compared to my daughter, I really I have a mild case, my daughter has a much more serious case. But even mild, it impacts a lot. You know, maybe it's not quite mild, but it's not like my daughter's. And I'm also 50. I've hiked before. I've had, you know, so many experiences. So do I want to make my art about that? But then again, I have an obligation as a woman, and there are other women who are coming out with this. Sia just came out, and there's like public women coming out. Lena Dunham came out recently with the same disease I have. And it's like, well, I'm thinking to myself, they're coming out, so there must be a reason. And it's kind of like a balance. I want to have a balance with it. I don't want it to be, you know, but I do want it to be part of the conversation. So thank you for having a show that actually, like, kind of in a way forced me, you know, because of what you were looking for an artist. I was like, well, I could apply to this. So I was like, because, you know, I was like, well, I'm this white, you know, slight kind of privileged woman, so I'm not marginalized, but then I kind of am because I have a chronic illness. So it's like you've opened up this kind of narrative in my head to be like, it's an important thing that we can allow ourselves to have the power and the presence to show the world who we are, who our truth is. And that ultimately, like, is purpose.
I have to say, Dena, I don't feel like you identifying your work with disability is playing a victim. I mean, you're contextualizing it, if anything. Like any of my work that I do, it gets contextualized within like this Chicana art, you know, which I can't take that away, you know. Like just my brown body dancing in my living room carries so much context to it, you know. And in addition to the kind of music that I'm dancing to, there's so much politics in that. And we have to embrace ourselves, and you know, even if somebody's going to look down on us or think that we're playing a victim, you know, representation matters. It matters that we're speaking up, that we're making work, that we're putting it out into the world, because there's somebody else who's going to see it and relate and feel empowered from it too. And then we have this more like diverse realm of voices who are celebrating themselves and making art, and that just makes the world better, you know.
Rock on. I'm totally into that. Totally.
I want to read a quick comment from Anu Anam. She said that you are helping people by coming out about it. People like your daughter. Your being out about us is setting a good example for your daughter. We are not victims. Heart. I know that Renee talked about a project that she is working on, and thank you, because I was like, oh, we should talk about anything that's coming up for us before we kind of part our ways for this conversation. So I'll open it up to any new work or any work that's being public or just things in your head or anything.
Okay, vote. VOTE. That's what I cannot have a public forum without saying, okay, I just spoke to my dad, who spoke to his friends whose kids are in Michigan in college. And apparently, and he said that his kind of a lot of the take is that they would rather like sit this election out because neither candidate works. So I'm just going to say, please, just, there's no way we can be accountable if we don't vote.
I'm a dual citizen, and so I consider that I am voting not only for Americans, but for the world at this point. Yes, vote.
Yeah, I'm planning to be there in person and mail a ballot. I'm definitely going to make it happen. Yeah, encourage anyone to vote. Absolutely. It's like the artists exercising our voices. It's everyone's voice.
It's my daughter turned 18, the one who has Ehlers-Danlos. And so she gets her first vote this year. It's really exciting.
If no one else has anything else, because voting is super important, and thank you for bringing that up, Dena. Yeah, definitely to take advantage of this platform to remind people to vote. If you're in California, I looked it up. Apparently, we automatically get mailed a ballot, which is pretty exciting. But I may do it in person because my polling place is usually there aren't that many people there, so we'll see. But yes, make sure you vote if you're here in the States. So as we close, I want to just talk a little bit about the show, and we have an upcoming event this weekend on Saturday at 1. It's going to be broadcast live on here. We're going to do a Zoom. Teresa, do you want to talk about it? So Teresa's doing, it originally was a Zumba Zoom with her show, with her piece. But there may be some complications with doing that at 1 o'clock.
It's gonna be a little bit hot, It's gonna be 108 this weekend. So just for the sake of my body and the other bodies who would be dancing, I have a little air conditioner here that barely does anything, I'm sure, with 108 degrees. So we're changing up the format a little bit. So going along with the concept of what the piece is about, where I'm using the space in here to learn. We're doing a lot of online learning as well. I've been learning Spanish. Like, I didn't grow up speaking it fluently. It's always been around me, but it's never been like just fluently coming out of my mouth. And so a lot of my friends I'm from the Central Valley, and a lot of my friends in the Central Valley also, we just never had to learn Spanish. Like, we were always around it, but it just we're like, a lot of us are 3rd or 4th generation up there. And so we're gonna have a Zoom, but I'm going to have some of my friends who speak Spanish and who don't speak Spanish also, who are also like identifying as Chicano, Latino, Latina, come on the Zoom, and we're just going to practice our pronunciation together, and we're going to practice the language together, and we're just going to make this a space, but knowing as well that it's kind of a performance space. It's called Kinda Chicana. So so I'm really interested in having that discussion. I'm also part of a group called Spanish Sin Pena, which was started by a woman who's from East LA who didn't originally grow up speaking Spanish. And she started this group it's very trauma informed, because there's a trauma that comes with being Latino and not speaking Spanish, not like natively speaking Spanish. There's a deep trauma that comes with it. And so the group addresses the trauma, and then we practice together. And so I would like to practice with my friends, because I've been very like hesitant to do such a thing. So I just kind of want to like break that seal and do that together on Saturday. And I thank you, Nicole, for the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. We'll talk offline, because I'm interested to see if I can participate / facilitate. Because I have an interesting, anyway.
Awesome.
Adoption politics. Awesome. But yeah, so that's happening this Saturday at 1 California time. And we've also got some Instagram takeovers that are going on at acogedor.space. Right now, Jerry Allen, she's been traveling from Los Angeles to Philly. And so she's taken this opportunity to meditate on this idea of home and share with us some of her images from the road. On the 5th, which was Saturday, Tobin Nichols will take over for 4 days, and I don't want to give anything away, but it's going to be fun as well. It's got a whole different take, and so yeah, there'll be a total of 8 takeovers. Each artist has got about 8 days on the Instagram. As I mentioned before, this is the first of 5 panels, and there will be a total of 4 ancillary events. So Teresa's is the first one. And then I'm talking with one of the artists to do one the weekend of the 19th and the 20th. We're kind of firming up some details. Michael Rippins will be doing a still life live on the last Sunday of the month at 1 o'clock, and that's a participatory performance as well. You can either watch it or you can sign up and participate on Zoom. And then Jody Wood, she has got a mutual aid project called soszip.com. And you can go there and type in your zip code and see what people need. And then you can also offer to help them, or you can offer, or you can say what you need during this pandemic time and the depression and the civil unrest. And we all need some support. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This has been great. I loved all the comments. I'm so excited that so many people shared the video and were here with us. I want to thank Dena, Renee, Teresa, and Georgina for taking the time and, again, being just so genuine and sincere and having this wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much.
And thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, of course.
This was wonderful. I really appreciate this, so thank you.
Yay.
It was very nice to meet everybody. I enjoyed this panel.
Likewise.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so I am going to stop the live feed to Facebook. If you guys can stay on a little bit so we can debrief and go out. Okay, bye, Facebook.
Bye, Facebook.